Good morning, ladies and gentlemen. My name is Deborah Uber, the Education Coordinator for the Embryo Adoption Awareness Center, and we are excited to have you all here today and pleased to bring you the webinar, 15 Things You Need to Know About Your Embryo Adoption Profile. Before we get started, we're going to do a little bit of housekeeping. During the presentation, all participants will be in a listen-only mode. There will be a question and answer session at the end of the presentation using the questions you submit through the Q&A feature. You may submit your questions at any time during the session, and we will answer as many as possible at the end of the presentation. To ask a question, simply click on the Q&A panel on the lower right-hand portion of the screen, type your question into the dialog box, and click the send button. If you happen to be in the full screen view, you can click the question mark icon on the toolbar in the lower right-hand corner of the screen. This will open the Q&A panel on your screen only. When you submit your question, it will be visible to all of the panelists, but not visible to other attendees. We expect the presentation to last approximately 45 minutes with 15 minutes for Q&A. We will be distributing a copy of today's presentation and a comprehensive list of answers to all questions submitted today during the webinar. If you are experiencing any technical difficulties during the presentation, please contact WebEx Technical Support at 866-229-3239. And just as a reminder, this presentation is being recorded today. Let me switch it over to this slide. Lori, I'll unmute you and go ahead and give you the ball. Our presenter is Miss Lori Holden, who is an active blogger and the author of The Open-Hearted Way to Open Adoption. Miss Lori writes at the Huffington Post and is a regular columnist for the Denver Post website, milehighmamas.com. Parenting Magazine calls her blog a must-read, and Adoptive Families Magazine has her named a top blogger. Lori is an adoptive mother of two and has personal experience with creating family profile not only for herself but for multiple adoptive families. Lori has been one of our favorite presenters, and we are very happy to have you here this morning. I will go ahead and let you take over.
Wonderful. Thank you so much, Deb. I am thrilled to be here, and thank you so much for deciding to tune in and spend your time with us today. I come from the world of traditional adoption, and some of what I'm going to share with you has a lot to do with people deciding on somebody else to parent their child. One of the big differences between traditional adoption and embryo adoption is whether there's a planned pregnancy or an unplanned pregnancy. But the tips that we're going to go over today are really geared towards embryo adoption. And I do remember what it was like 15 years ago. I was in the position to try to build my family, and that quest just kept being met with roadblock after roadblock. And, you know, here you are. You know that there's a finish line up ahead of you. You've already been through a diagnosis. You've already made 100 weighty medical decisions, maybe 1,000 of them. You've been poked, you've been prodded, you've been held in suspense more times than you can tolerate. You've jumped through more hoops than you can count, and you're getting weary. I remember this. I get this. You know that that finish line is somewhere up ahead, but between you and that is yet another project. And that project is the profile that will determine your fate. Nothing small about that. You think that that might put you over the edge. But today we're going to break it down and let you know 15 things that will help you complete this last major project well and in an effective way. We're going to start with 8 tips. So what makes a profile work? I have talked with a lot of people, as have Deb and Kimberly at the Embryo Adoption Center, and we have gathered some anecdotal research from those who chose other parents for their embryo or for their child. And while each profile reader comes with a viewpoint that's as unique as a fingerprint, we did find a lot of commonalities in what attracts and what doesn't in a profile. The first thing we're going to cover is number one, accurately represent yourself and avoid playing to your audience, because you know what, you don't know who your audience is, so you just need to stick to your core and accurately present who you are. One set of donors might love dogs while another might be allergic to dogs. One might be into museums and another into skydiving. If you're trying to say what somebody else wants to hear, you're losing your core, you're losing your ability to accurately portray who you are. And to bring about the best match, you simply need to be truthful about who you are and what your lives are about. You might see this theme running through as we go on. Second point, show what makes you unique. If you have a horse, show it. If you're bilingual, write a few words in another language. You want to stand out. You want to be memorable. You want to be the one who blanks. You want to have a handle or something to hold on to. You're trying to make yourselves grippy. Jessica told me the mother I chose proposed to her husband in an NFL football game on the big scoreboard. I liked her spirit. So find something that makes you distinct. This would be a good time to point out that it would be a good idea to share unique parts of your dating story or your engagement story or your wedding. Your relationship and the stability that you bring to this is something that you'll want to highlight. Show your reader how and why you fell in love with your beloved. Your reader wants to see connection and friendship and stability. The third point is to find balance. Okay, and by this I mean, try to describe your life as full enough that you're not dependent on a baby to make you complete, yet not so full that you have no room for a child. A woman named Gwen revealed that she said, both people had high-powered jobs and were involved in so many things that I just couldn't see how they'd fit in another responsibility, let alone one that's a human being. Make sure that you're also balancing both voices, both partners. Don't give the impression that only one of you is in the driver's seat making this process go along. So sometimes the wife will be speaking, sometimes the husband will be speaking, and use a lot more of the pronoun we than you do the pronoun I. Point number 4, inject humor. If, in fact, you are humorous people. Most people have some kind of levity that helps them get through hard times. So see if you can come up with an amusing anecdote or a funny photo that shows that humor is one way that you deal with the ups and downs of life. Kelly told me, she said, they had a picture of the whole family, cousins and sisters and grandparents wearing 3D glasses and watching fireworks. It looked like the family had a good time just being around each other. So this doesn't have to be profoundly hysterical, but just something that is light. In this, you can also maybe include an anecdote out of your infertility story or one occasion where you had a funny moment from this that you can share, a way that you stuck together or you cheered each other up or that you used humor to lighten a really hard situation. If you have that available to you, put that in. Show that you can deal with weighty things with lightness. That will be something that your readers will resonate with, because donor families have probably had many occasions to do this, and seeing you do it will resonate with them. It shows that you're moving through any grief that you've experienced on your journey. Point number 5. We're going to talk a little bit about judginess. I'm going to ask that you do kind of a self-assessment and see if you have any kind of judgment about people who go through IVF to build their families. Because just as hopeful adoptive parents should aim to be non-judgmental about their reader, a woman in an unplanned pregnancy who might make them parents, so should you resolve any judgment that you have about folks who have created embryos through IVF. It will serve you well if you're able to respect the decisions that other people made in building their family in the same way that you'd like others to respect the decisions you're making in building your family. So here's another key theme that you're going to see through this is empathy. Develop your empathy for people who are making hard decisions, and this will take you far. Not just for now, but later when you're parenting and you're dealing with a child's identity building years. Empathy is a key ingredient to this long-term journey, not just to becoming a parent, but to being a parent. Point number 6, remove all hints of desperation. And you need to come by this honestly. This isn't something that you can portray one way and be a different way. So desperation is as much of a repellent to your reader as it was to a potential spouse back when in your dating days when you met your beloved. If you can't come by this honestly, I suggest that you get some more counseling, work on your grief as you continue on your path. Sarah told me, somebody who was looking at profiles, she said, I didn't want my baby to be the one thing that saved these people from a life of misery, so I passed on them. Now, how do you know if you've got some desperation showing or if you've got some desperation at all? You would use phrases like, embryo adoption is our only option, or this is our last chance, or we need you to help us build a family. You see those keywords that I'm emphasizing? Those ring with desperation. And you want to try to resolve that within yourself, not only so that it doesn't show, but so that it's not there. Now, on the flip side, what you do want to show is genuine gratitude, because gratitude is something that will help foster a connection between you and your reader. We're going to talk a lot about resonance and connection. This is what you're after, a desire that they have to take the next step based on what you've shown and told. So don't be too chill and too standoffish about the prospect of being chosen, but also don't go overboard with ingratiating yourselves. So this whole thing is kind of Goldilocks-y, where you're finding the sweet spots between too much and too little. Point number 7 is to be brutally honest with yourselves. This will require some reflection, some mirror work for you to look at what you've got in your draft profiles. Or, better yet, have a trusted friend or someone who's less vested in the outcome look over your masterpiece for you and give you some feedback. Ask this person to be candid about the photos, the letter, and the tone. Maybe you can't see that Aunt Tilly looks awful in that family photo, but you do need to know if she comes across that way. Gwen told me in one picture of a family picnic they all had red eye. I knew it wasn't real, but my impression was how demonic. So if you want to get a sense for this, I'm going to give you another challenge. Go to a site that shows parent profiles. This could be traditional adoption or embryo adoption, it doesn't matter. Go to Adoptimist or Adoption.com or America Adopts or any of those and just scroll through the waiting families, the waiting couples. You're going to see some that draw you in, and you're going to see some that make you go, whoa, what made them think that was a good idea? So as you do scroll through, check in with your gut reactions on the profile photos. Be aware of the possible reactions that you're having and the possible reactions that your own reader might have on the images that you present as your key feature image and everything else. So this goes back to empathy, putting yourself in the other person's place. What would you like to see if you were on the genetic parent side? Add in or take away as necessary. Keep trying to put yourself in the other side's shoes to the degree that you are able to do that. And point 8 is to tinker. So tweaking, this is tweaking. Tweaking just a word or an image can dramatically change your results. If you've been waiting for a while, make a minor change like the background or the lead photo. One program administrator told me if your profile isn't garnering interest, then do a review once in a while with minor changes. That might help. So you want to make sure that when you get towards the end, when you've got your creation in draft form and almost ready to go, that you really put some time into editing, into sharing and getting feedback, and into reviewing and revising as if you were the reader. Because this is your main tool that the reader has for getting a feel for who you are. This is your way to build connection and resonance. So make sure it's the very best that you can. Be willing to tinker. All right, before we go on to the next 7 points, which are a little bit of a different angle, I want to talk a little bit more about images. Because this whole process is one of showing and telling. And focusing on the showing, we want to make sure that the showing is as effective as it can be. I had a conversation with one embryo donor, and she told me, she said, I want to see real pictures, ones that aren't staged, ones that show a day in the life of the family who might raise our embryos. I wanted to see some unguarded, candid shots of the activities and the things these people do and will do with any resulting babies. I want to be able to picture baby here. I would love to see fun wedding pictures because sometimes that adds personality to the relationship piece. So We want some portraits, but we also want some candids. Connect with a friend who has a good camera and who will take some good candid photos of you. And this is a good place even for selfies. Check your Facebook stream if you're on Facebook. Do you have any pictures that can be included in your profile that show who you are? We encourage you to share them in a story format rather than in a list, and make sure you're showing and telling in that story format. Don't make this just about the two of you. Include some pictures as well and stories of friends and family too. You want to kind of give a deep and panoramic view of your life, not a narrowly focused one. Your goal with showing and telling is to enable the readers to build a movie in their minds about what growing up as your child may look like. And if they can't get a good sense of that, they're more likely to pass on you. So think in terms of moving pictures, moving over time. So far we've covered the 8 things that you should do, but it's helpful also to learn from the mistakes of others. So I've got for you now 7 things not to do, and I call them the terrible twos, T-O-O-S. So the first one here is too perfect. Alan and Jackie had perfect teeth, and their parents and siblings had perfect teeth too. They had flawless skin, and they took perfect vacations together, and they tended a perfectly manicured lawn. They were blessed. They were happy. You've probably seen this on Facebook. But of course, your sense of those when you see posts like that is you know that the people are only showing parts of themselves, the parts of themselves that they deem acceptable. And a reader might be put off by a couple that belongs on a magazine cover. That puts distance between you, not resonance. So I encouraged Alan and Jackie to add dimension to their profile by getting real and by opening up about their dreams and maybe even their heartaches, again, not dwelling on it. Because 3 dimensions is more attracting than 2. And related to the very first thing we covered, real is what's really resonant. So share some ways here that you'd like to grow as parents. Put some thoughts into your hopes and your dreams section so that the readers can get a sense of you both now and in the future. What are you wanting? What are you wanting to build? What are you wanting to do? How will you deal with challenges that come up? This is also a time to mention that it's a good idea to address child care in a realistic way, being real. Don't gloss over it or cover it up, but do be very clear about what your plans are for child care. Don't assume that you know what the reader wants you to say. Be real. Point 2 is too much. I once saw a 20-pager for Debbie and Kurt, and it went on and on and on, and it left nothing to be revealed, and it came across as a little bit self-centered. Remember that sometimes more is less, and sometimes less is more. This goes back to the Goldilocks syndrome. You want to find that sweet spot between too much and too little. This ties in a little bit to point number 3, which is too self-indulgent. So this is similar to the lengthy profile, is the me, me, me profile. And this comes across as more of a monologue rather than an invitation to a dialogue. And that's a very subtle difference. And when you think about the difference between a monologue and an invitation to a dialogue, which one is more likely to foster a connection? I had clients, they were named Sunny and Blake, and they each went on about themselves for several pages, not even acknowledging that there was a reader. And the narratives that they put together weren't composed out of actually being egotistical, but rather they just didn't know how to write about and present themselves in a conversational way. But once they changed their approach from this book report style into something else, their profile got noticed and chosen. So what is this magic style? Instead of each one of them telling about himself or herself, which is hard to do without sounding like you're bragging or hiding your light, Sunny and Blake each told about each other, and that's easy to do. And in doing so, it invited the reader into the profile. Listen to this. Blake said, "You should see Sunny when she's coaching soccer. The children flock to her like pigeons on breadcrumbs." So phrases like this and viewpoints like this allow the reader to see the couple through the beloved's loving eyes, and that's resonance. So make sure as you go through your letter and your packet that you are addressing the family letter. Don't lose sight that they are part of your journey. Beware of being a little bit too self-focused. Remember, there's another party out there that you're making a connection with. Point 4 is too pretentious. So there's no need to show off the driving range in your backyard or your annual trips to Paris or your collection of sports cars. These shows of wealth are not what a donating parent finds comforting. What they find comforting is a wealth of time and a wealth of love. In addition, pretentiousness can build a barrier instead of finding ground with your reader. Again, you're looking for connection and you want to resonate. In a similar vein, be careful not to do any one point in trying to portray yourself. Maybe that's mission trips, maybe that's marathons or feeding the homeless or something that you just kind of keep hammering away on. Moderate. It's okay to share, but not to overlord. You don't want to super hype yourself. Beware of the humble brag. Point 5 is being too guarded. Even though you have many photos and lots of text, the reader could be left not really knowing anything about you, the hopeful parents. I had clients named Gina and Ken, and they had suffered more than a few setbacks in their journey to family, and by this point they were understandably cautious. They wanted to protect themselves from even more heartbreak, and in doing so, they built a wall to keep bad things out. But the funny thing about walls is that they go both directions. They also keep the good things out. And throughout their profile pages, it was clear that Gina and Ken didn't want to reveal too much about themselves. Reading their profile was the equivalent of having a conversation with a person whose arms are tightly crossed over the chest. Doesn't that make connecting difficult? And you could almost feel the wall evident in the closing line of their profile. They had said, "Please contact us only if you are serious about choosing us." Now, you won't say anything like that in your profile, but if you have that aura, you need to make sure that you catch that and deal with that. So clearly, this isn't a problem that would be solved just with wordsmithing. So I counseled Gina and Ken about dealing with their own grief and the hurts and the importance of opening up to their possible futures, opening up again in spite of the hurts. I suggested that they get some counseling so that they could get to the point where they were more open to this process. Otherwise, they would continue to attract exactly what they wanted to avoid, which was being rejected. So we want to let you know not to treat the profile as just a thing to check off your list. If you're too minimalistic about your information, it will be hard for the reader to be drawn into your profile. Ask a family friend if your personality comes through, and if it doesn't, put it in. Point 6 is too boring. Katie and Gil were careful not to put anything in their profile that was too anything. They were rabid Cornhusker fans, but they didn't want to offend anyone who backed a different team. They loved to ride motorcycles, but they didn't want to freak out a reader who was more cautious. They attended their church regularly, but they didn't want to mention it in case their faith wasn't the same as the reader's. In short, Katie and Gil were hiding their lights under a bushel. So I interviewed them to try to find out what made them unique and vibrant, and I found those qualities that I just mentioned. Once they revised their profile to show themselves out loud, it wasn't long before their profile was chosen as the perfect match for a donating couple. So do you see how this fits in with being unique and distinct and being yourselves out loud? The last point on this one is being too footloose. Let me tell you what I mean by this. I saw a profile once, Sam and Bill. They had photos of them on a honeymoon in the Bahamas, toasting each other with umbrella drinks. And then they had a photo series of them ziplining in the cloud forests of Costa Rica, and more of them scuba diving in the crystal waters. And to round out the seasons, they told about how they love to ski on weekends during the winter. So it was hard for a reader to envision Sam and Bill with a child. I asked them to tell me what their lives would look like once they had a child, and with their answers, we revised their profile to reflect their future as parents as well as their past as an active, spontaneous couple. So do everything you can to help your reader form these mind movies that we've been talking about, envisioning you and a baby, a child, a teenager, over the next several life stages. And let me also say here, as a rule of thumb, if you wouldn't want your employer or your minister or your grandmother to see a picture, don't show it in your profile. Make sure that you're circumspect about who your reader is, how you come across, and what you would and wouldn't want to see if you were in their shoes. So, as you can tell from what we've been talking about, much of what we're saying is be real. This circles back around to where we started and what we've been touching on throughout as our touchstone. So more than scrapbooking abilities, more than having a gift with the written word, more than having mad photo skills, more than anything else, the real draw is authenticity. This is the key. This is the key to an effective embryo adoption profile. Show who you are, not who you wish you were, not who you think someone else thinks you should be, but who you are. Be loud and be proud. Be empathetic. Put yourself in the other person's place and be reflective. How do you come across? I want you to imagine, back to authenticity, I want you to imagine when you first met your spouse and what might have happened if you'd misrepresented yourself just to make a good first impression. Eventually, your house of cards would fall and your opportunity for love would have gone away and evaporated. It was vitally important with a partner, and it's equally important when showcasing yourselves to the genetic parents of your future child that you don't hide who you are, but rather you reveal who you are. This overarching principle, as well as the tips that we've covered here, will enable you to show yourselves in your best light. And that's what you want your embryo adoption profile to do, to show yourself in your best light.